Good morning. I'm Dr. Wilson Pearl, Associate Professor, Department of Corporate Secretaryship of KCS Kasnada College of Arts and Science. Definition of underwriting. According to ICSI, underwriting may be defined as contract entered into by the company with persons or institutions called underwriters who undertake to take up the whole or a portion of such offered shares or debentures as may not be subscribed by the public is in consideration for remuneration called underwriting commission. So underwriting commission is something which is paid for the work done by the underwriter. Next, what is the purpose of underwriting? As per the section 69(1) of the Companies Act, a company must receive the amount of minimum subscription as mentioned in the prospectus within 120 days from the date of opening of its issue. Otherwise, all the amount received should be returned and the issue abandoned. The expenditure and the time spent of the issue was wasted. The company goodwill also suffers tremendously because of this. Underwriting acts as a sort of insurance of or guarantee against the danger of not receiving the minimum subscription. The basic purpose of underwriting is to guard the domicile sword of minimum subscription, which is not less than the 90% of the issue value. Then let us see what are the different types of underwriting are there. There are two types of underwriting: pure underwriting and firm underwriting. This pure underwriting has two subdivisions again: complete underwriting and partial underwriting. This complete underwriting is again subdivided into two parts. When an entire issue is fully underwritten by a single underwriter, that is one situation. The next situation is when an entire issue is fully underwritten by two or more underwriters. That is the second case of a complete underwriting. Now, let us go for partial underwriting. When a part of the issue is underwritten by only one underwriter. Then second case is when the part of the issue is underwritten by two or more underwriters. That is the second case of the partial underwriting. Then, let us go to the firm underwriting. The underwriter must subscribe for the shares or debentures underwritten by the firm. When there is oversubscription also, underwriter gets priority over the general public for the shares or debentures underwritten by the firm. This firm underwriting also divided into two categories, two ways it can be worked out. So first way, when the firm underwriting is treated as marked application, it gives a different answer. The second case is the same firm underwriting can be treated as unmarked application also. So there are two ways for treating a firm application. That's it. Now, let us go through the format for how to work out the net liability of the underwriter. Now, if it is complete underwriting, when there is only one underwriter, how it is calculated? The number of shares gross liability minus number of shares subscribed or marked application. It will give you the net liability of underwriter. That is the first way to calculate the net liability of underwriter if it is only one underwriter. Then, and it is a complete underwriting as well. Then, next case, if there is more than one underwriter for complete underwriting, for example, if the company is issuing 10,000 shares, the whole 10,000 shares is underwritten by underwriters. In such case, it is called as whole underwriting or complete underwriting. Now, how to calculate the net liability for this? Now, the format here is if there is more than one, that is, we assume it is three underwriters. We name them as A, B, C. We'll start with the gross liability of the underwriter. That will be taken in the first line. Then, followed by which will be called as marked application. We'll minus from the gross liability, we'll subtract the marked application as the first instance. Then, after subtracting the marked application, suppose if there's any surplus, which means if you get a negative balance after subtracting the marked application, for any one underwriter, the negative balance is called a surplus, and that negative balance will be shared among the remaining underwriters. Here, in this case, I have given an example of C getting the negative balance, and this negative balance will be shared by A and B in the gross liability ratio. Then, after subtracting that, then finally you will subtract the unmarked application. The unmarked application is nothing but the application which is not marked as A, B or C. That is unmarked application. That is again given to the credit of the underwriters in the gross liability ratio. The finally will be the net liability of the underwriter. That is it.